Positively AJ is our third project, and this is a carryover project from our fall semester. AJ is one of the Valley's most historic communities, as most of us know, and boasting some of the best outdoor amenities and views in the Valley. Unfortunately, this gem of a community needs to overcome some of the long-standing negative image problems held by residents and visitors that stifle growth and community pride. So AJ's goal with this particular project is to understand the perceptions of different audiences and stakeholders, identify community assets, strengths and weaknesses, and develop a viable alternative to improve perception and bolster economic growth. So on this particular project this semester, we had two classes involved with different facets of Positively AJ. Theater students actually sought to expand Apache Junction's cultural vitality and social cohesion through dramatic reenactment of those stories. So they actually did a public event recently at Flatiron Park, which I'm going to say I was out of town and missed that, but we were very excited to maybe see a snippet of that. And then also Josh McFadgen's History in the Wild students, and one Master of Sustainability Solutions Applied project student identified important cultural assets, community assets, by engaging residents and visitors in online and in-person mapping exercises. So both of these courses took steps to improve residents and visitors' impressions of Apache Junction.
So now I'm going to bring up Josh McFadgen, member of Barrett, talk about their project, this digital history that they're doing for cultural asset.
Okay, come on in, guys. I'm going to try to do the Three Stooges thing here, and everybody going back and forth from skit to skit. Our product that we deliver to the city will be much less tangible, but we'll be delivering some results from a really kind of breakneck 7.5-week semester. We're going to do something. I'm going to do something unthinkable here. Try to go right to my concluding slide first, and then go back to the start. Did it work? Yeah. So the conclusion of our work here with the History in the Wild course is very similar to Stephanie's course, is that communities are empowered by sharing sense of place and place attachment through participatory storytelling and mapping. Okay, so I've got this. Should we hold it?
I'm just hard of hearing.
Okay, so participatory mapping and storytelling, and I've got this interesting position here where I'm joint appointed between history and the School of Sustainability. So I'm doing humanities and social sciences together. My 4 students had to listen to both of those this semester. So on that note, who wants to hear a story? Okay, so we're gonna start this. By describing quickly our project overview, the participants, the methods and results, and then back to that conclusion. So the project overview is we're trying to work with Positively Apache Junction to understand past and present values that will help them plan for the future. And so I'm going to quickly summarize the project and try to let these students do it. But first I want to show the results of the mapping side of it. So we did storytelling, we did temporal and spatial storytelling here, and the mapping side of it resulted in a nice map of place-specific values, all kinds of values that were contributed by some of you here in the room. I'd ask you to show your hands, but it's supposed to be anonymous. So of a survey that we literally just got the data for on Sunday, like finished gathering data for on Sunday. And what we have here is over 1,000 data points by 150 participants in about 9 days. And it worked really well using this neat software called Maptionnaire that's a online participatory GIS. And we can also do fun things in it like map the density of these values and look at these hotspots. So here's the challenge, though, is that how do we actually measure and discover place attachment? This is one way. Another way that humanists work through is through storytelling, through histories. And so my course that I was launching this semester is called History in the Wild, and it's a designation in the history department that takes history beyond the classroom, engaging communities. And this was a big challenge because it was an online course, so in the online context, we've got 2 issues. People can't get to the space, and it's a condensed course, so they always happen in 7.5 weeks here at ASU. So we had a really compressed timeline and a lot of students, 35 students, history students as seniors, trying to tackle this project of a problem of measuring and discovering place attachment. So participants listed here, the students in two different groups, and Andres in a second will introduce himself through the 595, he's Paul Prosser student. And then, of course, our partners with the city and with local history organizations, and we'll shout out to them. But Andres, can you tell us a bit about 595?
Yeah, so our class is a culminating experience project management course where all of the students in the School of Sustainability and the Master of the Sustainability Solutions class, we have a semester-long project that we work to do a sustainability intervention to overall find a community and make the world a better place. And specifically, my project here with Josh and Derek in the online class was to do all the mapping and everything that you saw, but do it in person. So I went out to two events, the Lost Dutchman Marathon Expo in February and the Lost Dutchman Days Rodeo, which was Friday and Saturday in February. So with those 2 days, I was able to meet people, talk to them, hear their stories, put stickers on maps, and eventually put that data onto the online version to be used for the rest of the online class. So, yeah.
Andres will tell you more about that in a second, but first, Derek Leggett is one of the students from District 45 who flew all the way here from Kansas City to tell you about how they interacted with the community.
All right, I think we'll do the next slide. All right, so actually there's a picture of Holly on the left side, I believe, who's also one of the class members who came out to the location. And then we had two just from my group who actually visited the library. So this was I believe, the first introduction to digital history class at ASU offered online, History 485. And it was a really unique class in that it integrated working with a real community, which obviously all these classes do, place history, web publishing. All of us published WordPress blogs that can actually be reused by the city or by the library, other places within the city. We did a community values mapping exercise. There was a little bit of geospatial analysis, and then we also studied textual analysis. So it was very much a hybrid class. So. And
just maybe 2 seconds.
Yeah, so we had 8 groups because there were 38 and 35 students. And we covered the Superstition Hotel, which is an amazing place. Looked at water in Apache Junction, the parks and trails, which ties real well to some of the other exercises here. 2 people focused on the Apache Trail. We had somebody look at indigenous presence in Apache Junction. Historically, we found some women's club scrapbooks from an Apache Junction women's club that ran for over 30 years and have a history of Apache Junction from a women's perspective. Really cool. And then we looked at the high school. So that was our 8 groups. Okay.
Thanks, Derek. So I'm just going to quickly mention some of the methods that we did. We used digital history, obviously, and then community values mapping, which is a form of participatory GIS. So what is place history? In a nutshell, it is learning to read a landscape and tell the story of one place over time, right? So it is local history, but it's often informed by environmental historians here, like William Cronin, who's one of the best known, former president of the American Historical Association. And so we were teaching the students some of these methods of a sustained treatment of one place over time. That's a challenge when you're in the online context. Do I have time, or do you want to just skip through? Do we have time? Okay, so this is a video that I did with the help of ASU Online and at the bus, and we went out on site. Let's see if this works. Tab over till we get to this one, he says. Go to the left. So I'm not going to show you this whole video, but it's a way to kind of embed a course in the landscape without actually being there. So it's a real challenge, but ASU Online's got some phenomenal videographers, as we'll see. So half-decent professors, I guess. I would actually bring it up. All right. Professor goes on at length. Let me try and turn him off and get back to the better. Are we in it? Yeah, okay. So videos like that help the students actually kind of experience the place and see what it was like without actually being there. Some of them were able to go to the place. We saw Holly in the map. Derek has been on site. Andres, though, is going to say his part, and then we promised you a story that will end with Derek telling you what their group did specifically. So this was just one method of getting into a place history. The other that I mentioned was community values mapping, which is used by many social scientists, participatory mapping. And so through that process, there's been many ways to do it, right? With a paper map, conducting a map biography. There's been indigenous place studies. Through that, there's also now there were many mail-out versions, but now there's this online tool. And Andres will quickly introduce you to both the map version that he did and Maptionnaire very well.
Hi. So when I went out into the communities, and when I went out to Apache Junction to talk to people personally, the city of Apache Junction provided me their booth, so I was able to talk to Larry for one of the weekends. And this is the map that I used, the brown-orange with the yellow outline. Those are the city limits of Apache Junction. And that's a group of children participating in the survey. So basically I would stand there, people would approach, or I would approach them and say, would you like to place your favorite places in Apache Junction on the map? And each sticker, here you can see, this is one of the maps. So it's on the second day of the rodeo, and each little dot with the color is a sticker, and each dot has a corresponding value. The colors correspond with the code. Basically, yellow would be for recreational values. The red ones would be for culture. You see any white or shiny silver ones, that's like a special place. And this is all of the 3 physical maps that I had. I compiled it and put it onto Maptionnaire. And basically starting off what Josh's class would do for the second half of the semester. So I went out and did this in February. The online class started off in March and went on to the end of the semester, like he said, this past Sunday with their data results. And with all the dots scattered everywhere, it kind of looks like they were thrown everywhere, but there are definitely hot spots in the community, places that are highly valued. They mentioned earlier Flatiron Park was one of those places, a new park that was built within the last year, and of course some historical sites as well. Superstition Mountain on the far end, on the top right where the green is at, that has a lot of values, and a lot of them spread throughout people's homes, friends' houses, restaurants, those kind of things. So being able to meet people and talk to them personally about how their community, how it's valued and how people around them value it, it's really useful for an opportunity like Positively Apache Junction, where they're trying to improve the reputation of the city. And one of the best ways to do that is with values of the people who live there themselves, to say, these places are important, these places we think that they're valuable, and this is how we value them. So with that different color coding, you're able to see, Prospector Park has a lot of green on it. Well, it's really, really beautiful. There's a lot of aesthetics there, right? So that was basically the methodology that I used and how it turned out. And this is a kind of a shout out to Maptionnaire, the website that we used. It's a community mapping survey website where basically this is an example that they show off in Helsinki. That's a lot of data, a lot more than I was able to gather in 2 weekends with stickers. But that's kind of what we recommend as a way to quantify qualitative data. How do you measure values? What does that mean? What does that look like? In this context, putting on a maps is something that's usable and that you can use for promotional purposes. Yeah, and based on the project. Yeah.
Thanks, Andres. So Andres was able to do the sort of trial run with both paper values and then plug them in. So he came up with, I think, about 185. It's on his chart there, 185 values that were mapped in those two events, which is great. And then he plugged them in, and then we were able to launch the survey through social media, through, I believe, the city's email. We think it went out to email because certainly a lot of people responded, so it must have gone out to a lot of people through those avenues. So obviously there are lots of ways we can test and question whether a representative and these kinds of questions about it, but it was really a trial version, and the goal is to hand it over to the city. But that's not all. We were able to give histories as well. And so these 8 groups, which Derek is going to conclude here by telling his story, his group's story about those awesome scrapbooks. We believe that present values are connected to the past. And one thing in this with this instrument before is that we found that if you gave people the chance to write and tell you why a place was special, they often went at length and just told the most interesting stories. We were married there. We met over there. This is where we take our kids to baseball, and we've been doing it for 14 years or whatever. So we wanted to leave a space for that and let people write those stories in, and they're all sort of qualitative stories that are attached to physical places. The students, when they started, had to be able to had to work on place histories to offer to the city, and they had no idea, right, which places were most interesting to locals. And so we worked together with Matt McNulty and with other people in the city to say, hey, what kind of stories would you like? And so we gave those students a list of 12 or 15 to choose from, and that's what you see. That's what you see in this list here. Really quickly, I don't have time to go into it at all, but they all produce digital products like WordPress sites, like you see here. This is the Water in Apache Junction site, which totally changes directions. You think it's going to be one thing, and in the end, it's something totally different. And they worked with Frank. Is he here? No, okay. They worked with Frank at the Water District, and it came up with some really neat information that they never would have found in general reading. They also produced a timeline that showed like key events, and so now members of the public can go in and see kind of key events in the water history of the town, both from specific places in the entire area. Group 3 did this awesome website on parks and trails in Apache Junction, working with Liz Lagenbach. Yeah, and she was tremendously helpful. So, I mean, you could go through and just even once the city releases these, if they choose to, I mean, you can go in and read some phenomenal stories about the history of each one of the parks and main trails, arranged in a park-by-park format, so Superstition Shadows Park, and showing its both history and current use. All right, so we're going to conclude with the stories that came up, and Derek's going to tell you about what they found with this really interesting way of linking these present values with stories over time. He's going to conclude it. So,
all right. So when we first started this, I kind of go through the maps. When we first started this, we were all looking for places in Apache Junction, so we were probably overloading the website, any website that had to do with Apache Junction. We were Googling for days and trying to find people. And we found a couple interesting, as you mentioned. Somebody focused on the parks, awesome website. Somebody focused on the Superstition Museum. Somebody focused, we focused on the library in our group. And then we did the surveys, and this is the overall survey of Apache Junction. You can see a heat map and the individual dots. And those red spots on those heat maps and this pie chart, which shows the values that they place on those, came back. We had picked our places at the beginning of the class, and when we got the survey results back, the places that people valued in Apache Junction, the places on the heat map, the values that they applied to them, were places that everybody in the class had picked and was focusing on building a website on and collecting history. It was a pretty neat story. I'm going to go over our group really quick. We produced I think Josh actually went to the library, took some pictures, and Trish, Peltier, one of the ladies who works in the library, had a series of scrapbooks, 2 minutes, wow, had a series of scrapbooks from an Apache Junction Women's Club that ran from 1960 to 1993. and they kept a scrapbook almost every year of the history of the Women's Club and the history of big events in Apache Junction. And so we've taken and digitized some of those, and then we've tied those to places in Apache Junction where you can click on the map and see the history that was found in the scrapbook, or you can actually look at the scrapbooks online. And so, one of the things that they did, we focused on the Lost Dutchman Museum and the Apache Junction when we were looking at our historical data. The reason we chose the library is because the Women's Club, the lady who was the president of the Women's Club from 1961 to, I believe, 65, was actually the big driver behind funding and getting a library in Apache Junction. Apache Junction wouldn't have a library without a lady named Mrs. Opal Hansen. And what we found is when we look at these values that a lot of these, you get basically the same clustering of people interested in the library as that are interested in the Lost Dutchman Museum for different reasons. So we highlighted the area and just focused on those so you can kind of filter out all the noise. And then we kind of overlaid some of the same historical photos that are in our website and in our blog on top of that. And then looked at the heat map, and what you see is the two dots for the Lost Dutchman Museum and the Apache Junction Library are almost the same size and almost the same characteristics. The difference is people put more value around the community history at the library and the Arizona and U.S. history around the museum itself, which is very interesting. The other thing that we found out is that for your library, you have a lot of young people. 21 in their 20s, early 20s, who are very interested. They use your library. They're interested in the history of the library. We did not expect to find that at all. We expected it to be an older demographic. And when I visited the library as an outsider, I was shocked that it was packed with people who were in their, teenagers, 20 years old. It was a really neat environment. And again, a lot of this goes back to a woman who had the vision in the 1960s to bring a library to Apache Junction. That's why you have it. So it's a really cool story that connects the past to the present. And we're only able to digitize 2 of these books and only put a history on one of them. These books talk about the first drive-in bank and how mobile banking was changing the world. And Apache Junction got its first mobile bank. They talked about a lawyer who was a woman lawyer, and she was Mrs. Opal Hansen was listed as the man of the month in one of the Phoenix newspapers. Okay, and so all of this has just been hidden in these scrapbooks that are sitting in an office in the library, and that vault in that library has amazing history of Apache Junction, and it's just waiting for somebody to take it and pull it out and make something of it. And our hope is that people take the parks and they attach it to what you want to do to improve your parks. People take this scrapbook and keep pulling values out of it and associating it with the present in Apache Junction and say, how is the past connected to the present, and how can we be proud of our women's history and connect it to maybe make more women's clubs and women's organizations in the future. The Women's Club in Apache Junction ended in 1993. It was because a lot of the women were older. I think that Apache Junction can create a really valuable asset by, again, bringing out the history and then saying, how do we take something like this that was awesome in the past, totally change the city for the better, and bringing it into the future. And at the end of the day, that's what all these classes are about. It's about taking the past, connecting into the present, and then moving into the future with it. So that was our project at a high level. We do have some analysis here. There's some recommendations. But at the end of the day, we hope somebody will continue the story. Apache Junction has an awesome women's history that's just waiting to be uncovered. So that was our project.
Thank you.